first off, thank you for joining us this morning. I know how busy everyone is at the moment, start of the year and all of that. For those that perhaps haven't met me before, or I recognise many of the names and faces on today's call, my name is Stephen Knight. I'm the CEO and founder of Pimento. We're going to record today's session, so please turn your cameras, smile throughout, and remember to use the chat box as we walk through the session. Obviously, we want to try and make this as interactive as possible, so if you've got any questions of the panel, please do take the opportunity to pose them. The video will be available after today's session, so if you want to share it with any colleagues or friends, you may do so. And there's no presentation as such, so no need to actually sort of write down anything. Hopefully, it'll be pretty self-explanatory. Okay, we all work with independent agency owners every day. We all are there to really help independent agencies thrive, grow their revenue, win more business, build their teams. Yet behind the scenes, we're acutely aware that things like shareholder agreements are outdated, perhaps missing, that tax and legal structures are quietly eroding value, or they've drifted into what we call an M&A conversation without a clear path. The problem is that most founders only really start asking the right questions when a buyer is looming around the table. And by then, many of the big decisions perhaps you should have made have really long past you. And that, unfortunately, impacts on value. It impacts on your ability to leverage the situation to your advantage, and optionality disappears. So today really is all about selling your business. It's all about control. Sorry, today isn't about selling your business. It's about control. It's about understanding how wealth planning, legal structures, and M&A realities it all intersect, and how decisions you make years in advance shape both the upside and the downside. We're also going to touch on what most of you are fully aware of, but we'll touch on the recent budget, what it means for agency owners, and cut through some of the noise to focus on what genuinely matters from a personal wealth, tax, and exit value perspective. So this is not a pure play M&A session. This is basically looking at your life in general, why you entered this business and what you're hoping to get out of it, and how you can plan for a better outcome over the next few years. I'm joined by three people who sit very much at the sharp end of this every day: Jeff Day, Ryan Lisk, and David Boise. Between them, they have seen what happens when founders plan early and what happens when they don't. Quick reminder for those that haven't met these gentlemen before what they do. Jeff is the founder of Wilcox Day. It's a wealth management business. He's been in financial services for well over 25 years, and for the last 5 years, he's worked very closely with Pimento and its members. He helps you make better decisions with your money so you can feel confident today and know when you exit that you have what you'll need to continue to enjoy your lifestyle. In other words, money is a means to an end. It is not just about how much you have, it's also about how much you need to have that lifestyle you'd like to aspire to have. David Boise is the founder and managing director at M&A Advisory. M&A leads agency transactions to maximize the value of your business across a broad range of different agency types. They work with consultancies, marketing communications companies, creative agencies, digital agencies, martech, and they've been doing it for 30 odd years, so he knows a thing or two. And I think, having worked with David now for at least, must be 7 or 8 years, he's particularly in touch with the grassroots of the independent sector, really understands the dynamics, the trends, and what's happening out there. Ryan Lisk is a lawyer. He works with startups, scaling businesses, hybrid legal, and he's well known within the industry in helping to navigate complex legal situations with confidence, and really acting on behalf of either the buyer or the seller, and finding ways in which he can help the seller, in most instances, maximize the value of their business. He's part of a team that regularly supports business agency leaders through mergers, acquisitions, and exits. He's also known for sharing practical and memorable examples of legal blind spots. And we've all got them, let's be honest about it, that catch businesses out from time to time. Put straightforwardly, he basically steps in and helps them out and attempts to basically get them on the straight and narrow. So if you take nothing else out from today, if there's one thing you take out from today, is I'll encourage you to listen through the lens of optionality. It's not, am I selling now, or am I set up to properly sell in the future? It's a simple kind of starter, which is, how do I ensure that as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, as somebody who's invested time and energy in building a business, get to a place for myself and my family with confidence and with in a very unstable world, some certainty, really, I guess is what we're all looking for. So I'm going to start with question one, if I may, and this one is basically to David or to Jeff, so you can decide who wants to go first. Um, from your perspective, what's the biggest misconception indie agency owners have about being successful versus being personally and financially secure?
Do you want
You
to
want to go
go,
first,
Jeff, or
Dave?
shall I?
I don't mind. I'll go for it because we'll talk about
Go
the
for it.
financial
Go
side
for it.
first, and then I see it time and time, and I think you're so focused on building your agency, and it's tough between the growth, the strategy, the changes in the cycle of the market, the staffing, the budgetary changes, everything. They become so engrossed on what's the value of my business that oftentimes you haven't thought about, well, actually, what is it I need? And I swear I would be a wealthy man if I had a pound for every time an agency owner said, "Well, my business is my pension." I can think of scenarios where I have one client who sold a business for £2 million and then approached me and said, "Great, I've got 2 million, Jeff. I want to do stuff." I said, "Okay." We went through the numbers, and it wasn't going to be enough. So we then had to challenge him on saying, "Well, actually, what are your choices? It's either rinse and repeat and start again, or it's actually compromise the lifestyle you want because you hadn't planned. Is it going to be okay? And how are we going to change things?" And Stephen, I'm reminded of the dinner we had in Manchester, where there was a lovely chap there that should remain unnamed, but there was about 20 around the table, and everybody was talking about exit, and he just jumped in and said, "I made the mistake. I thought had a great business. I sold it. I sold it for a lot of money, but realized I'd lost my identity and I didn't have enough. So I'm now on go-to." So don't be focused on just the sale. Focus on ultimately what is it you're trying to achieve? How do you get there? How do you make good decisions through the run out through? And what you want to do all the way through is remove reliance on that sale event. Because, just look at last year. If you were entirely reliant on the sale event and we had a period where it was tougher last year, you had a knock on EBITDA, will you have enough? The more you can just plan 10 years out, just don't, before you even think about selling, just start to make the good decisions. If you're in an economic cycle where it's downturned, actually, the sale should add value to your lifestyle, but it shouldn't be the only determinant. And it's something we see far too often. And I love the dinners that we host, Stephen, where we have those conversations because there's always somebody in the room who goes, "I've made that mistake." And then rinse and repeat.
Thank you. And David, what's your perspective?
Yes, I would agree. Having a growing agency doesn't always equal personal security, and that's the big misconception. The other one is really people believe that their business is valued on multiples. There's a lot of sort of a legend in the industry where people think, "Oh, my must be worth a 6, 7, 8, whatever multiple." But very often these businesses, these growing businesses, aren't bankable because they need, and we can talk about it a bit more later, but they need to be sustainable to be bankable, and to deliver value. So you need to get in a position, you're talking about options, you need to get in a position where you have options, you make that agency bankable, and you then you can realize that value when you want to.
Okay, and kind of the starting point then for those conversations with those agencies. Do you feel that in general agencies come to you early enough in that process, David, or do you think that actually there's work to be done prior to the point where agencies think they're actually in a sellable condition?
Yes, there's I don't think people realize that, and I don't know the reason for that, Stephen. I think part of it is due to people are just focused on running their business, and maybe even thinking about exit, maybe they're feeling a little bit emotionally disloyal to their business, saying, "I want to build this business, I'm not ready to sell it yet." But really and truly, preparing your business for sale starts from day one. You need to make that business sustainable as much as you can. You need to have separate IP. You need to have good systems and procedures, and you need to have your legal structures set up properly. Um, all sorts of these things. You need to have a good second tier management, and you've got to be thinking about these things all of the time to build that business ready for sale. And it certainly takes a lot longer than, 6 months before sale, or even once you've started talking to a buyer.
Ryan, is that
David,
the case for
can I
you?
just, I was just going to jump in on one point that I think is really, really important there. And I do this sometimes when I do a session is you said you might not be thinking about selling your business. At some point, every single person on this call is going to exit their business. Now, that is either by choice because you've sold, by unfortunate circumstance because you passed away, or maybe during the economic conditions, it's folded. So at some point, the certainty is you will exit. And actually, you have to plan for all of those eventualities. So if you're in a partnership, you need to talk to Ryan about the legal agreement to make sure if something like that happens. You need to talk to David about the structure and strategy around it. And you need to prepare almost the day you set up your business for an eventual exit. Because if your family's reliant on that money in the future, you ideally have it where you control the outcome. But if you don't, that's actually even a more detrimental an output there. So it's just as you said, don't feel disloyal about your business. You will exit it at some point, whether you want to or not. And so plan and have your contingencies in place.
Yeah, I mean, Ryan, you have obviously long-term relationships with a lot of the agencies you work with, but not a lot of them necessarily come to you at the point of inception. They might come a year in, 2 years in, 3 years in, and they want to talk to you about employment contracts, or they've got a problem with the client not paying, or whatever it happens to be. How do you create some urgency with agencies and actually get them to, sit down with you and talk about the fundamentals like shareholder agreements and, employment legislation, all this other important stuff?
So I think what I would say is a lot of entrepreneurs are risk takers. That's why, they do what they do. That's why they decided to set up their business. And then they continue that journey and, they're on the hamster wheel of growing the business. They'll take risks here and there, and that's second nature to them. When it then comes to their buyer is not necessarily an entrepreneur that isn't risk averse. The buyer is usually very risk averse and wants to really do the due diligence to make sure that what they're buying is a safe investment. And that's really where you have the collision between the entrepreneur that's grown the agency, winged it, cobbled together some T's and C's online. Some of the employees might have contracts, others may not. They've used ChatGPT for a freelancer agreement, IPs all over the place. There is no shareholders agreement because each time they're going to talk about it, it's awkward. They don't want to talk about it if they have a fallout, so they just ignore it. And then they get a bit of value in the business because you can still build a valuable business without having these legal foundations. It just falls to pieces when somebody interrogates it. It's a bit like building a lovely house from the curbside. It looks amazing, but you go in and you find there's subsidence, there's wood rot, there's other kind of dodgy electrics in there. Would you still buy the asking price for it? Of course you wouldn't. And that's the same, I think, with some businesses. They look really good, but then when you start prodding and probing, actually it's really messy, and that's where the price changes, and that's where all of a sudden it becomes a game of hindsight, where they wish they had actually taken some legal advice earlier on to get prepared. So if you take nothing more away from today other than talk to professional advisors as early as you can, that is my main takeaway that I'll say throughout this talk today. It's just so
Yeah.
important.
I'm smiling because I hear that so many times from agencies. I was speaking to an owner of a consultancy yesterday, really nice chap, quite a high profile business, was approached to sell the business 12 months ago, went with a large M&A firm, possibly too large, to be honest, relative to the value of his business. And then he found himself in exactly that situation where they were looking for a kind of a data lake, a warehouse of all of those things. Yeah. And of course they didn't have it, and it was a kind of mismatch of basic expectations. And particularly, obviously, when you're talking to some of the group agencies, they start from a different place. So, I mean, is there something like a checklist you could perhaps share with us after today's meeting of, basics, kind of brilliant basics you should have in place as an agency owner, things you should be thinking about from a legal point of view? And maybe, David, you could do something similar too from an M&A point of view. I suspect there'll be crossover between the two, but I think it just helps people understand why this stuff is important. The issue, of course, with all of this is it's fairly daunting. And actually, I've got to run a business. I haven't got time for all this. How do I do all this and run a business? It's hard enough as it is. So I guess, given that The latest study last year was at 56% of all agencies. I think this came out of the Whale Company, was suggesting their owners, 56 of all agency owners wanted to sell their business. There's a whole lot of reasons for that at the moment, not least of which, obviously, the market conditions are tough, and the amount of change that's now required within agency land because of AI and other things. It's quite daunting, to go through that again, yet again. So I can understand why a lot of people do want out, but they're not going to get out successfully unless they actually go through these processes and have actually got it all sorted, as well as obviously having a viable business with a strong proposition. So yeah, it's a complex game. David, sorry, Jeff, back to you. We started with kind of the why. Why are we doing this? Why are we in business? What are we hoping to achieve? And obviously, the why varies enormously depending upon the personality. Some of us end up drifting into business. We work for large agencies, we get made redundant, or we've had enough of working for somebody else, and we set up our own practice agency, whatever you want to call it, and we end up doing it. And we never really kind of crystallize that why. It's probably, it starts out of a sense of independence and control, but there's not necessarily an end game in mind. Do you find that a lot when you're speaking to agency owners?
Yeah, it's all the time. You've either set up a business and it's sometimes skyrocketed and you've lost sight of, as you say, your why. Or alternatively, you have had a strategy, or you're running your consultancy and you're quite happy doing that. And one of the first questions I always ask people, and it's one that I encourage everybody to reflect on, is imagine your kids have grown up, you've cleared your mortgage, and you've sold your business. So it's now that point of, I've got my freedom, I've got my time, I've got all the time in the world. And the question I regularly ask a couple, and I always like doing this as a couple, is, if you were to be in that position, how much money do you need per month to live the lifestyle you'd like? And it's almost the biggest tumbleweed moment. And often it's, I don't know. And it's like, but you're saying you want to build a business for 10 million pounds. Well, what if you don't need that much money and I tell you you only need something that's 5 million? Or what if you say it's worth 5 million and I tell you you need 10 because you want to do wonderful things? I was caught up with a guy the other day and he said, I want to live on 20 grand a month. And I sort of burst out laughing and said, well, you've got no savings, you've got no assets, you've only got a business. Okay, have you had the company valued? And he went, no. And what do we think is going to happen here? So first off, we need a company valuation. Then we need to work through, how do we actually carve out some money? Because 20 grand a month is meaning you're going to need a really good sale value. So he's got a notional number in his head of what he wants when he asks the question, but actually there's no planning or preparation how you're going to get there. And I think it's, at the end of the day, if you had all the free time in the world, what's going to make you happy? Because otherwise, why are you killing yourself running an agency? Why are you working the hours that you do? Why are you doing what you do? There must be a purpose at the end. And take it back to what's going to make you happy. And then work through, what do I need there? And that's where you need the ideas of, David from a valuation perspective, a Ryan from, how are you going to structure this? If you want to exit, well, how are your partners if you've got them going to buy you out? A Stephen in terms of the now next why and the consultancy side of saying, well, how, if you need to get it to a 10 million pound value, how are you going to do all the right steps to get there? And actually making sure, if you've got a partner, they're on board to say, well, is this going to be enough for us to be happy? Because actually, if you're all agreed that that's the strategy and that's the plan, you've got something to work towards. And it is just open a bottle of wine this weekend and sit down and say, if we get rid of all of our liabilities, children, and everything else, what is it we truly need to make us happy? And already you've started the formulation of a plan.
I mean, it does take us on to other things because, a lot of people think that actually the money will make them happy, and that actually very often it doesn't. Very often, they'll sell their agency, and actually then they kind of fall in despair because they don't have purpose.
Lost.
So
Yeah.
It's getting that balance, isn't it, in your life, and trying to realize what your dream is, but still recognizing you need another dream. Beyond the dream you've got today, beyond the kind of realization of all the effort you've put in, there needs to be something, or maybe not, depending upon your individual, to take you forward. Okay, so this all sounds like a lot of stuff. We've got basically the financial requirements of, what do I need to do? How do I want to live? What does that really mean? You've got, as you say, a general reliance that people see their business as their pension, which is a very dangerous place to be. When you start with that conversation with an agency owner, and if they have said to you, look, my business is my pension, how do you start to unravel and create further wealth opportunities for them that are less dependent on an exit, or less dependent upon some sort of event?
Um, Sometimes it comes to the shock and awe, because you need to change their mindset a bit. And I'll use an example there, or analogy I use. If you went skydiving, you got to the plane and you're up in the sky, and the instructor said, "Here's your parachute." And then you said, "Great, where's my reserve?" And they said, "We're not going to give you one." Would you jump? Well, none of us would. But if your business is your pension, you're jumping out of a plane with all your hopes and dreams in the back without a reserve chute. And when you kind of get to that realization, you've got to do something, you can't rely on that. It's too much risk for your livelihood, your family, your lifestyle. Then it's about, how do we carve out money sensibly? Some of it's really boring stuff. It's so beautifully tax efficient, like bunging money into a pension. So you take out your profits while the time is good. Others is about, well, actually, let's keep the money in the company, but let's try and sweat it, because we're not wanting to take it out because we've got to reinvest. Others are looking at, well, how do we get rid of debt over a period of time and just make good decisions? But actually, how do you also sort of structure finances in the right way so you're doing it in the most tax efficient way going forward? And, the person that's probably missing from this call as part of that is an accountant, and having a great accountant or financial director that's going to help you in that process is like gold dust. But all of it needs to work together. With the other side is, heaven forbid, as I said, if you exit beyond your control, making sure you've got other things in place, like a great shareholder agreement of protection, and that your family's going to get out the value. So in the absence of you, they're still going to be okay. But you don't have to do it all in one day. This is about baby steps. And the problem you get is where somebody approaches me, like somebody we all know on the call, approached me and say, "I've been offered 5 mil, I'm going to take it. What do I need to do?" And it was like, well, start 10 years ago. Because actually, now that you're going to sell the business, we've lost every element of tax efficiency possible, because we can only put 20 grand a year into an ISA. Well, we're not going to do anything with the 5 mil. We can only put 60 grand a year into a pension. Well, the 5 mil isn't going to touch it. You've lost your ability. So coming back to David's point, you almost need to start your business like you're going to exit in the future. You want to make good decisions as you go through. You want to make hay while the sun shines, carve out the profits in the right way, reduce the reliance on that event. Because if you wait till the final hurdle, you're going to have problems. And it's not going to be as efficient, and you're going to have bigger tax anchors throughout your lifestyle to live the lifestyle you want. So, waffly answer there, Stephen, but hopefully it hit the mark.
M&A can be an opportunity as well, Stephen. If you get your business in a position that it's a bankable business, it's a sellable business, there are opportunities along the way to de-risk. I mean, there's some people that would sell a part of their business, and that not only de-risks them, they can put some of those proceeds into a pension fund, but the other opportunity is you can really scale a business with another partner. There are some sort of trade partners. I did a deal quite recently where the buyer sold a majority of his business to an international buyer, and it's grown like anything. He uses it as a growth vehicle. So not only has he managed to bank a decent sum of money, he's still involved with the business, still earning well from it. But it's been a great growth opportunity for the business in future. So,
and I think you make a really, really important point there, because I think we all think of an exit as a total exit, and actually there's so many different variants, from, as you say, taking on external funding for growth, for bringing a partnership together, for working with an overseas organization to extend your footprint, to EOTs. There's lots of different ways in which you can realize value and spread the risk, which is what you're suggesting there, isn't it, David? You're saying that rather than just having everything in one pot, actually find a way to actually ferret away some money so that you can actually, put it into pensions, put it into ISAs or whatever you need to put it into. So over time, you kind of de-risk the situation. Okay.
But I was just to add very quickly to that point, Stephen, if I may, the other option as well, which often gets overlooked, is something called a member's voluntary liquidation, which, if you don't have a buyer lined up, but your business is profitable and you want to get the business out tax efficiently, you can always look at that avenue as well. And I do think we've actually got somebody on the call. I think Matt from FTS. I know you've got a perspective on MVLs. I don't know whether you wanted to say a couple. If you may, Stephen. Sorry, I'm
of course. So let's bring Matt into it, because that's a really interesting and useful point, because the work they do, because of their names, sometimes kind of people think it's quite fatalistic. It's not, absolutely, because they're really there to kind of help businesses that have these opportunities as well as businesses that are struggling. So yeah, Matt, if you can give us a perspective, that'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, guys. Members voluntary liquidations, you're absolutely right. They're really tax efficient way, a very powerful tax efficient way of actually getting cash out of a business. So if you perhaps haven't done all the planning necessarily in advance that Jeff and David were talking about, and you're sat there with a pot of cash, if it's more than, I think, £25,000 cash at bank, then it actually works out to liquidate the company and say a solvent liquidation. And the advantage is that any distribution of that cash is treated as a capital distribution, not income. So actually what you do is you get taxed at the capital gains tax rate rather than the higher tax rate. And if you qualify for business asset disposal relief, or BADR, you can actually pay even less tax. So you can, at the moment, members voluntary liquidation do at the moment, you're only paying 14% tax. It's going up in April, thanks to the budget, to 18%. But that's still a heck of a lot lower than paying, taking it out as cash, being taxed at the higher rate. So they're very effective vehicles, and we do them anything, I'd say on average, $250,000 up to, we've certainly done a few over the last year of 4 or 5, I think 13 million's the biggest we've done. But of course, there's a ceiling on that anyway. So, but yeah, they're really good vehicles to use.
Matt, can I just ask, is that the same as entrepreneurial relief?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
They changed the name. Yeah, so for many people, old school people would say entrepreneurial relief, but they've changed it to BADR. Yeah.
Okay, and that used to be 10% and used to be capped, I believe, at 10 million, and then it came down to like $1 million. So what it's now 14%, going to 18%, and the ceiling on it is how much?
I think it's the same. I think it's still $1 million.
Still $1 million.
Yeah.
So that's what they call lifetime value. So that actually you can do it more than once in multiple businesses up to that level. Is that right?
I'm not sure about the multiple businesses, because they at one point the HMRC were getting a bit twitchy with people who were money boxing and having serial members voluntary liquidations. You had a group. I suppose if you had a group and they're all doing it at the same time, you might. It was more people doing one after another. But I think Jeff might have a comment on that, or Ryan.
Yeah, it's a lifetime value of 1 million, and the other bit is if you run a small consultancy, let's say, and you have a partner, then they need to be on the books 2 years for you to qualify for 2 million, so 1 million each. So again, preparation and planning. If you're going to look at an exit, make sure you're at least doing it sort of, let's say, 3 years out if you're going to look to squeeze it as tax efficiently as you can.
Yeah,
and by partner that could be director too. Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm thinking spouse, because if you then put your spouse on the books, you hold them for 2 years, you have them as a 50-50 director. And then if you do an MVR or you sell, then you've got more that qualifies for business asset disposal relief. You've doubled your entitlement. But the government is squeezing the tax efficiency on that.
So I just think it's a natural opportunity for Matt to kind of partner with people like David, because what seems to me to be the case is that actually it's about how do I take the cash out of the business in a tax efficient way is part of the sale advice. And actually, that doesn't necessarily impact on the sale value, because it's a different entity. They're acquiring other assets, the talent that they're acquiring, the clients and other assets. They're not buying the cash that's sitting in the business, are they necessarily?
No.
One thing you do have to be careful on, and this is a whole nother conversation for another day, but just to highlight, if you do have people that are sitting on lots of cash and maybe the turnover has dropped, then you might end up losing the tax efficiency of it for inheritance tax purposes. So heaven forbid you were to pass away, it might be classed no longer as a trading business. So for those that are sitting on buckets of cash and actually are not having huge trading numbers, you definitely want to talk to your accountant to say, am I compromising essentially my wealth transfer in my next generation? Which is something we do see sometimes. I've got one guy right now with a ridiculous amount of cash that has just approached me for some advice, and their trading numbers don't justify it. So unfortunately, if they were passed tomorrow, then all that money's going to fit inside their estate because they won't qualify as a trading business. Yeah. So it's a spider web everywhere.
Yeah, there's a chap that's talking to the weekend. He's sitting on about £5 million in his business, and it's like daft as hell. And
go buy other businesses.
Well, yeah.
I was just sorry, Steve. I was just going to add that very often it's possible to tax optimize a deal. So when you sell a business, and usually you sell a business with all the assets, you sell the limited entity that will have your cash in it. So most deals are like that, and it's possible to tax optimize that to include your cash, a lot of the cash in the business, which is quite tax efficient. Occasionally, there are a business may have like really poor records, and the buyer doesn't want to take on that company, the actual entity itself. So they might do a thing called a trade and assets deal, where they leave you with the legal entity, but they will take over the clients and that sort of thing. And in that case, that could be a great method then, once you're left with the legal entity, to liquidate it using Matt's method. But most of the things are done by selling the entity with the cash in it. I suppose the other thing I should say, probably slightly independently here, is it's really important when you do deals to be commercially driven and not tax driven, though, because I find, things like, so many people are saying, oh, I'm going to do an EOT. And really, for an EOT, you have to have a management team that's completely up for it and really saying to the founder, get out of the way, we can do this better than you. But I've seen so many businesses do an EOT because it's tax efficient, and the management aren't up for it at all. They haven't got a clue sometimes. And you end up with a zombie company. And it's not only, not in the founder's best interest or the employee's best interest, because they have no career development like joining a bigger company. It's destroying the sort of creative industries in many ways. So I'm a great believer in just being commercially driven, because in a few years you'll easily outpace some of the tax benefits of a short-term decision.
I agree, David, and the other point, and I've heard you talk about this before, but getting the culture alignment right with your buyer, I think, is so important, because most deals rely on deferred consideration. So in other words, there's going to be an earnout. It's rare for somebody to get all of the money off the table on day one. So there's going to be an expectation for the sellers to stay on for the integration, to hit certain KPIs that have been agreed. And I think if you're now getting into bed with somebody that is just on a completely different page to you, it's going to be tricky. An old friend of mine sold his business to a very big, well-known public agency in the city, and the cultural alignment was horrific. And they left a lot of money on the table. They just thought, sod it, it's not worth it, and walked away from it. I think not even a year in to the deal, because of the culture clash. They were just two very different agencies.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Ryan. I mean, we say to our clients there needs to be three elements to achieve a successful deal and a long-lasting deal. And that's chemistry between the parties when you first meet. If your gut's telling you, I don't think I can work for this guy, run. The cultural thing, there's got to be a similar style of working, the way we do things around here. That's got to fit. And if that doesn't work, don't do the deal. And thirdly, there should be an outstanding business proposition. The fact that the two of you get together and you really, there's an addition element. And if you've got those elements, all three of them, that's great. And that will be a long lasting deal. If one's missing, just don't do the deal.
Yeah. On that example, an exact client I spoke to last Friday sold out. He had all of those, and he's in the second year of his earnout, and he's going to earn more than he had anticipated because they've blown through the numbers. And we were joking, and he said, actually, the reality, Jeff, this is great, is I'm going to hit my earnout, all my numbers. I've taken all my risk off the table, and I'm loving where I'm working without all the responsibility I had before, and the proposition's great. So I think I'm going to take a job earning a buttload of money through a PAYE and actually really enjoy it, because I don't have the pressure of running a business anymore.
I never hear that. I never hear that. That's fantastic.
I was killing myself laughing.
In the market to buy
sure?
more.
Yeah, it might well be, but it was so nice, because I was really fearful he was going to struggle when he got to the year one of his earnout, but everything is aligned, and he thinks he's going to stay on for, he figures, at least 3 to 4 years after, helping the business grow. It'll give continuity of staff. The culture is great, and actually he's almost got a new lease of life on it, which is is extraordinary. And I genuinely, I think we're all shocked because that's the utopian. It doesn't happen very often.
It does with our
So
deals.
I want to open this conversation up to everyone on today's calls. And if you've got a question that you want to ask of the panel, and please do so. Just either raise your hand or put it in the chat box. And whilst you're thinking about your questions, I want to go back, if I may, to one of the more fundamental questions, which is, first of all, timing around all of this stuff. There never is enough time. There's never the right time, but there's always the wrong time. But if you have a plan in place to sell your business in X period, working back from X period, how long do you need to get all this stuff in set in stone and working positively? I mean, are we talking 6 months, 12 months, 18 months? What's the typical timeline to get your legal structures, your shareholders agreements sorted out, to get your data in a place where it looks good, to get your proposition right, your succession management, all of that good stuff? What should agency owners on this call today be thinking about in terms of timing?
Well, my view on that is, I think obviously it's easy for me to say go earlier than you think, but I would say once you're profitable and you're stable, that's when you should start really investing in your exit planning. Because until that point, until you're profitable and stable, you're going to be distracted. And obviously the main aim is to stay in business, to trade solvently, fulfill your debts, and to look after your team. But I would say that when you can get a bit of breathing space, that's when I'd recommend partnering up with a good lawyer, with a wink and a nudge. Obviously use whoever you like, but good lawyer, accountant, somebody like David, a good broker as well that knows your market and your industry. That's when you want to start having those conversations. That's just my personal view. I'm sure some people will say it doesn't matter whether you're making a loss or not, get the advice early doors. But personally, in this market, I would say stabilize your business first.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I would. Go on. Sorry, Jeff. Who was speaking? I'll carry on. I would agree as early as possible. It becomes almost a philosophy, I would say, in preparing for an exit. When you start a business, it's part of your DNA. I think things like second tier management team, it almost happens from some of your first hires to say, have these people got potential to take this business to another level with me over the years? And the most successful businesses, I mean, things like if you look at an agency group like Brain Labs, that was his philosophy. He started off with a team that were going to grow with him, and that's grown to an enormous business now. And I think that's really important. I'd say that there's some things for an individual agency you can sort of mark off, but some of the easiest things are to get your financial systems and get an accountant to take over the accounting, those sorts of things, so you can have some quick wins. And usually the CEO will be left, doing things like, or the founder will be left by doing things like new business and stuff like that, which are slightly harder to move over. But if you have this philosophy from the start, it becomes much easier and much more natural. But we do a thing called a commercial review, which is a good under the bonnet look at agencies, and we sort of look at the strengths and the weaknesses and the things that they need to do, sort of plan a route. And that can be done 5-10 years before sale easily. And the most important thing about that is the end result is it doesn't have to be a sale, but the one thing for sure, it will leave the person with a much better business and make them sleep better at night.
And
Sorry,
I would echo the 5 to 10 years. For me, it's really important. I get really wound up to some extent when somebody has it as a birth date. I want to sell at 60. Like a client, really successful recruitment agency, coming up to his 60th. We've done all the planning. That was his absolute goal. Well, last year recruitment fell off the face of the earth, and so his EBITDA is appalling because he'd so emotionally anchored himself to an age rather than actually what does he need. He's now feeling like a failure, even though he's got still a good, successful business. But he's going to have to work for 2 more years to get it up to the value he thought he wanted to sell for. And in your world, as we often know, agencies are often a bellwether for where we are economically. You need to have fluidity around that, which is why you also want to take risk out. So 5 to 10 years out, start working through, well, what is it that we truly need? What lifestyle do we want? What's the end game here? Am I going to do any consulting after? Am I going to be a NED? Am I going to work for charities? Am I going to do something that actually I'm still going to have a purpose after? Then it's about how do I get myself in a good place? And if you thought I was going to sell in 10 years, but in year 8, you have had a run of 3 years of exceptional profit, it's looked really good. Well, don't push for 10 because you might end up in an economic cycle where actually it's no longer making sense anymore. So you have to build flex in the system because with the world we're living right now, we could be off this phone call and we could have seen that there's a 30% drop in the market by the time because Trump has done something or something has changed the economic conditions. Companies are going to hold onto their balance sheet because they're not going to spend. Your EBITDA is going to fall. And if you want to sell next year because you had a milestone birthday, you're going to have a problem. So you don't set specific dates. Build your systems, build your structure, build your team, build your fluidity. Give yourself, Stephen, your phrase, optionality, because there will be times where it might be dictated because it's not circumstances you wanted, but actually it's the right time. And so be flexible.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And the thing from an M&A perspective is if you prepare your business for sale and it's a bankable business, your business will sell at any time in the market. So even if you sell at the bottom of the market or the middle or the top, it's a bankable business trumps a timing in the market. So selling a bad business at the top of the market will be much harder than selling a really good business even at the bottom from an M&A perspective. So get your house in order is the lesson.
Absolutely. I was
Brilliant
just going
basics.
to. So I was just going to add that even if your agency perhaps is struggling financially or hitting that profit target is elusive, but actually one of the most unique parts of your agency is the quality of your client roster, where you've got some key accounts there, sticky relationships. Just make sure you've got really good contracts that are worth their weight, because that will be scrutinized when somebody looks at buying you. If it's not stacking out financially, but you need to get out, having a really, really solid contract structure with your clients that demonstrates that they're not going to abscond when new ownership takes over is so important. But also, if you're saying that a key part of your agency is the IP because you've developed a sexy new AI system, make sure you've got the IP ownership trail, document it properly, because again, agencies are prone to using contractors, freelancers to create IP, which creates issues of the ownership trail. So again, taking advice early on there, if you are relying on the value of your IP and your accounts with your clients to offset the overall financial downsides of the business, that's really where you need to go early with a good legal team to check that out for you.
Yeah,
Just a practical. Jump in. Sorry.
Sorry, Stephen. I was just going to say, following on, I totally agree with Ryan. It's great to have all the contracts in place. However, just one practical tip there is, the key to that is getting them agreed early and having those relationships early. The one thing I would not recommend is if you start the sale process and realize you haven't got client contracts, don't go to the client and sort of say, please, could you sign this contract? It's all about you can still sell a business without a client contract because the buyer will look at the quality of the relationships. But it certainly rings alarm bells at the client if you go to him and ask for a contract where you haven't done for 10 years, and it has it can be a bit of a cursed thing to go and do.
Absolutely.
It can promote churn. Okay, a couple of questions have come in. Stephen, first of all, you're still there, Stephen. Please come off mute if you want to ask the question yourself, or I can do it for you.
Yeah, sure. I've actually got two now. I'm an exited founder about 8-9 years ago. And I wish I'd been on this call prior to doing it, to be honest with you, because the advice is excellent in terms of the options. The first one is now as a sort of consultant to agencies around the unrealistic expectations of the number of agencies who actually do sell, and are a viable sales opportunity. So maybe to David, of the agencies that come to you and approach you, say, I want to sell, how many actually have a successful sale? So that's question one. And then question two, as the exited founder, the one thing that we got wrong was culture fit, actually, which made it quite an uncomfortable 5 years post the sale. And I'm just interested in how your tips and advice to agencies and how they would, test that culture fit and how far they can go to test that culture fit.
Yes, certainly. Well, We generally we sell most of the businesses that we handle, to be quite honest. It is possible. I think the thing about the marketing service, our industry, it's an industry that's constantly evolving. So people are looking for a skill set, a geography, or a technology. So we do find most of our deals over the 30 years I've been in business and the 15 that I've run M&A advisory, we sell about 90% of our businesses. And where we don't sell them, it's due where the business has a major problem, like they go and lose a client. But I can tell you, it's a lot easier to sell a business that's bankable, that's sustainable for us. Sometimes we have to, if you're selling a business without a second tier management team, for example, it really limits your options. The chances are you're going to have to stay and do an earn out for a few years. But it's still possible to find a buyer, but the number of buyers that are interested in you and the quality of the proposition can be greatly reduced. So hopefully that answers that. And the second one about chemistry and culture, we have a particular process where we have the first meeting with our client, with a buyer that client has with a buyer, is all about chemistry and culture. So he will have a personal meeting with those people we select, and it will each side will talk about their aims and objectives and that sort of thing. And if they get that feeling, or they'll meet a few of those. It's like, I suppose, buying a house. You get a feeling in your guts which one you really want to work with, which one you really like. So it's having a choice, and I think that's the nice thing about a process, is that you meet a number of potential buyers and you get a real feel about which person you like and what the business proposition is. And usually when the business with the best proposition will be able to pay the best price as well. So it's getting that culture, chemistry and business proposition absolutely right, and that usually means that buyer will be able to pay the best price as well because of that. And if they don't, that's our job. We'll try and make it work that way.
That's really interesting. One of the lessons I had through that was you can get a feel for something through meeting people and engaging with them. But the reality of actually working with them and actually beyond them and their teams can be quite different. And so, in that naivety, we went ahead with the deal. And I wish I'd actually, we sold to a New York-based company. I wish I'd just flown out and spent a week in that company prior to doing the deal, which we never did. We just kind of had lots of conversations. So I'm trying to get a better feel through sort of engaging more with the team.
That's a real lesson, Stephen. I think that's absolutely right, because there's a certain element of this M&A process it's really and truly, a deal takes sort of 6 months to a year to achieve. But in that, there is definitely a certain amount of relationship building for sure. And you can often stress test that. You get a feel for the other side and what they're going to be like post deal in that. Sometimes it could be working together on projects and all of these things, and we'd actively encourage that to do that.
And a challenge I would give anybody just around that when we talk people is how crystal clear on the culture of your business. Because the clearer you are on the culture of your business, which is part of your own growth strategy, the clearer you are on when you're looking at somebody else and what that culture needs to be. If you can't absolutely pin down everything that your value structure is, your culture, your people strategy, everything around that in infinitesimal detail, and it's something you live and breathe, then actually it's very difficult when you're looking at somebody else's to say, well, actually, how are we going to make that mesh? So the clearer you are, the better place you are.
Yeah, very fair. Thank you very much, Stephen. Matthew, I think you've got a question.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. Are smaller agencies selling, or do they sell in this current climate? So I'm talking about agencies sort of under $1 million sort of turnover. And sort of secondly to that point, is there sort of a multiple times EBITDA the only way to value an agency, or do certain deals sort of follow a slightly different criteria? I think from what I've heard, like some American deals are done slightly differently based on overall turnover and sort of other mechanics like that. So I would just be interested to see mainly actually whether smaller agencies actually sell as well as the bigger multi-million pound sort of deals.
Yeah,
Anyone
yes,
wants to take
indeed.
one?
Yeah, yes, they do, very much so. I mean, we're sector specific. We're a Marcom's M&A firm, but we're size and geography agnostic. So we work for smaller businesses and large. And, we would sell a business 300 or 400,000 profit. As I say, the thing is, the reason the buyers, what they're looking for is a new, as I say, new skill set, geography or technology to wrap themselves more closer to their clients. And therefore there are plenty of growing agencies that are looking to add that sort of business. And the thing is, they can finance that through a bank loan or something like that. So they're easy to finance. The thing about it, if you're selling one, is that, as I say, very often they're dependent on the founder. So you're not going to escape too easily. It might take you 2 or 3 years to get out, and you're not going to get a great multiple for a very small business unless it's sort of a technology business or something like that. But the multiples move up according to the strength of the sustainability of the business, how strong it is. So if you've got good second tier management, you've got a large level of profits, the chances are, or there's less chance of things going wrong for the buyer. And that's the whole thing. Buyers are very risk averse. But certainly tuck-ins, you can do quite well. Generally, just to answer the second part of your question very briefly, the multiples that businesses generally are based on a multiple. Sometimes on a small business like that, where they want it to merge in, then they might base that deal on revenue, even though the sort of underlying measure will be profits.
Okay.
Okay, thanks. That's really interesting. Thank you.
Thank you. So we're rapidly coming up to the hour. So I just wanted to pose one more question, if I may. It's kind of the quick fire round. So for each of you, as quickly as you can, one action each. For agency owners listening today, what's the one practical action they can take in the next 90 days to materially improve their future exit or wealth position? Start with Jeff.
Have a goal and have a plan. Know what you ultimately need for the future you want to live, so you can be happy and have a wonderful time, and then start to plan towards it. Part of it's business, part of it's personal, because they're very often intertwined.
Thank you. Ryan.
Legal health check. I think that's a no-brainer. And I think David's probably got a similar suggestion on that as well. But I would say definitely get a legal health check to just work out where your red, amber, and green areas are in your business, just to see. You don't want to be in a position where your buyer's legal team tells you how disorganized you are. You want to look into those dark corners as early as you can, and a health check will bring that out. So that's what I would recommend.
Yeah, I think for me, I think it would be interesting if for founders, if they stepped back and they said, if I wasn't in this business for the next 12 months, how would it perform? What would be the areas that would need developing if it wasn't to perform? And that would give you an idea of starting to say, I'm going to create a sustainable business.
Thank you, gentlemen. Okay, Alex has just posed a very late question. It's an important question that we come up against lots and lots of time. He says he's a successful agency owner, he's consistently profitable, but does having a dependency of one client basically being responsible for 80% of their revenue, how does that impact on the value proposition for the business? It's always everyone knows it's a problem. You try really hard to kind of grow other clients, and what happens is your existing client relationship, they just keep giving you more and more money, and therefore you become even more dependent, even though you're trying to find other business.
Shall I answer that?
Yeah, please do.
Yeah, look, it is risky. I think going back to the point, buyers are very risk averse. And for a buyer to buy a business with 80% dependency could be severely career limiting for them if it went wrong. But having said that, it is possible to sell a business with that sort of dependency. It's fun, but there certainly would be a diminution in value. You wouldn't get top price for it. But we just have to find the right buyer, perhaps somebody who works perhaps with a similar client or something like that, who needs that skill silo or something like that. So no businesses. I always say there's a buyer for everything, but it would be a challenging one for us.
Yeah, in that situation, Alex, one of the things you could consider is to make an acquisition or a merge with another business to kind of ensure that actually that 80% client is only 50% or 40% of the combined value of those two businesses. And that might be one way forward, because I do see lots of agencies with this problem. And ultimately, it's quite challenging because you're going to service the hell out of that client because they're really important to you. And you're never going to have enough time to bring on more new business and grow it. So actually, that's an option for you, particularly if you're profitable.
Stands out.
Yeah. Okay, everybody. Well, listen, it's been a really, really robust session today. One of the things that occurred to me is actually there has to be a product that combines you three, coupled with an accountancy firm that actually could actually do a day-long due diligence with an agency to say, right, wealth, KPIs, legals, and actually financials. How do we get those in a place so that you as an agency can basically perform as the highest standards? And we'll manage that for you over the next 2 to 3 years. So when you come to want to realize some value in this business, you're better positioned. So that's my challenge back to the three of you. It's an observation purely out of the conversation today. And I'm sure there has to be a product there with our accountancy friends, of which we have a number of friends in that space. Second thing is just to let everybody know we've got a couple other events coming up over the next couple of weeks, which I just want to draw your attention to, and they'll be put on the screen. First of all, David, myself, and 2 other members of the network are going to be sleeping out for our Centrepoint charity, which is the chosen charity that we're supporting this year, on Friday. The weather forecast in London is miserable. It's going to be cold. It's going to be wet. So if you want to sponsor us, of course, you're very welcome to, and I'll make sure that I'll send you a link in the follow-up to today. And obviously, we'll share the photographs of David and I sleeping out in town. Centrepoint, as you know, is a charity that supports getting kids off the streets. Something like 118,000 children across the UK every night are sleeping rough on streets or sofa surfing, or God forbid, even basically using apps to find partners they can spend the night with in order to get a roof over their heads. It's not the way we want things to go. On the 10th of February, we will have a Pimento Fuse workshop. It's called Spot the Gaps. You're all welcome to attend that. It's free. And our next Pimento Roots, which is for our under 35, so I think that probably counts most of us out on this call, with the exception of Laura and Spencer. Their pub quiz is taking place in London on the 11th of February. I've seen the questions, they're very hard, and they're all basically based around things that happened the last 5 years, but that's Gen Z's for you. If you want to pass it along to colleagues, etc., in the office, they can share their details with you. I think they're happy to get 20 or 30 people along. Who doesn't like a pub quiz? So finally, thank you very much once again to everybody on our panel. Thank you very much to all of you for coming along today. Hope you found it useful. I suspect it's probably raised more questions than answers, but it's just started the process, and hopefully you feel a little bit more informed than otherwise would be the case. We like doing these. Speak to you all soon, and have a great day. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.